Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Well, if you are enjoying our episodes, please do like and review wherever you are listening or watching. It really does help us build this amazing community of marketers just like you. In today's episode, I get to interview the brilliant Tom Roach. Tom is a highly respected figure in the marketing world, renowned for his rich career trajectory, insightful publications, and significant contributions to marketing thought leadership, and is unquestionably one of the greats when it comes to the topic of effectiveness. Now, I won't use the word guru again, I do use it in the episode, but Tom has been the author of a phenomenal amount of effectiveness papers, and so certainly knows what good looks like. And today we chat about that and how that journey came about, how he got rejected by most of the agencies he ended up working for when he started out, how he was a terrible account person, and some of the things he has learned along the way. We chat about how Tom set about instilling a culture of effectiveness, so much to learn in that. Tom talks about bridging the gap between creativity and commerciality, the importance of brand building in digital platforms, and the aspects of communication strategy. He also shares insights about award-winning marketing case studies he has worked on. And again, so much to take out of listening to these and obviously reading them afterwards, but the likes of McDonald's and Sainsbury's, and explaining the power of practical strategic planning, creativity, and consistency in achieving award-winning marketing campaigns. And as if that isn't enough, we talk about Tom's path to not becoming a choral singer. Today's episode will start after a quick word from our sponsors.
Today's show is supported by the Indie List, the leader in providing you with easy access to hundreds of highly experienced marketers quickly and cost-effectively. Visit theindielist.ie to speak to the Indie List team today.
Are you facing the maze of global expansion? Diplomat introduces the diplomacy model, a cost-effective, innovative approach to navigating the complexities of your brand's presence in international markets. Visit diplomat.agency.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
Tom, thanks a million for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. Delighted to have you here.
It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me, Conor.
Listen, I wanted to ask you about, you're kind of like an effectiveness guru, Mr. Effectiveness, but you did history. You don't want me saying that, but you did history in Cambridge. I kind of get the impression, like, how do you go from there? I don't know if people wake up going after a history degree, I'm going to get into effectiveness. I'd love to know how that kind of came about.
Okay, it's a funny thing because I actually don't think of myself as an effectiveness expert and certainly not a guru by any stretch. I know that I do tend to write about that, but having worked with somebody who is a genuine one like Les Burnett, who's he's a self-confessed spreadsheet jockey. I'm not a spreadsheet jockey. I'm not really a data person. I'm not mathsy, but I can go back and explain why. So I read history at university. Got to the end of my degree. I thought, in fact, I was also a choral scholar. I was a singer in St John's College Chapel Choir in Cambridge, and most of my peers were going to go on to be singers, opera singers, that kind of thing. I thought I was also going to do that, but luckily for me, actually, as it turned out, my singing teacher said, "No, you're not ready for this. You're nowhere near as good as those guys. What are you thinking? You can't go to music college." So he put the kibosh on me becoming a singer, fortunately, because I would have not been a good one. And so I had to work out what I was going to do. So I think I sort of reached into my sort of my mind about things, about careers advice and that kind of stuff. And I think I basically realized that I'd always been into creativity and pop culture and culture generally, and was quite into the idea of where creativity meets commerciality, I guess. That kind of friction point between the two, the join between the two. And I'd also just really loved ads. So when I think about this, I always remember a GCSE English teacher put on a video, a reel of I think they must have been like Cannes Award winning ads. And one of them was Guardian Points of View.
Oh, wow.
and which was a classic John Webster BNP DDB commercial, which I just thought was really interesting and clever and smart and a brilliant story, just a brilliant, smart piece of creativity. And that's what I think ultimately made me think, okay, well, advertising could be a thing. And so I wrote a bunch of letters to agencies and failed to get in the grad recruitment rounds, but got some work experience and got my way in that way. So I kind of worked in an agency when they were pitching for some stuff. They won the pitch, and then I was in.
God, that's like it. I'm fascinated with those journeys. Like, you know, and there are always these moments where, like, as you say, you know, the music teacher's like, yeah, you're not quite ready for this.
Not just not ready. He was like, his actual words were, music college is not remedial class. And that was a blow, but a fortunate one.
You've worked in incredible agencies, in like AMV, BBDO, Leo Burnett, BBH, Adam and Eve, and now Jellyfish. So from that, first writing of that letter that you wrote to an agency you got in, did you at that time, not maybe have a plan, but kind of think, you know, these are you wanted to be in some of the top agencies, or how did that kind of happen?
Well, funnily enough, I think I wrote 12 graduate recruitment forms. And in those days you had to do them by hand. And all of the agencies I ended up working at, apart from Jellyfish, which didn't exist at that point, rejected me as a graduate. So I think I may have got an interview at one of them, but I was Leo Burnett, but all four that you mentioned rejected me as a grad. So I came in through a small agency called Court Burkett and Company. 18 months later, I realized it was a bit small for me, and I needed to get a proper training. So I was really lucky to get a job at Abbott Mead Vickers BBDO, where I was for 10 years. So that really set me up. But at that point, actually, I was an account manager. I was a really bad account manager.
Were you?
Yeah, really bad. And my account director at the time, I think she was probably on the verge of firing me, because I just wasn't that into status meetings and contact reports and all that stuff. And in retrospect, I mean, they probably should have fired me, but I was doing more strategy stuff. I was really into writing briefs. I was really into probably more into the data at that point than I've ever been. And was working on Mars Confectionery, and they needed a planner. Somebody had left, and the head of planning basically was like, well, that Tom guy did that presentation with all that data in them. I mean, I look back and it was probably the most horribly data heavy presentation I've ever done, but it marked me out as something not being an account person. And so he lifted me out of account management into planning, or strategy as we now call it. It's always called planning back then.
I guess you got into probably the effectiveness kind of stuff. I know you took the diploma in effectiveness, the IPA effectiveness diploma there.
Yeah.
Again, what was it? Because again, it was probably maybe relatively new as a concept or topic, or how did that happen?
Yeah. So that, funny enough, it's not solely effectiveness focused. I think they call it, we used to call it the MBA of brands. So it was kind of more about brand strategy. There was, I'm sure, an effectiveness component. But I guess, how did that happen? It was like 2005 or 6 or 7. 5 or 6 was the first year that course started. I guess I was a junior planner or junior mid planner who was sort of recognized as somehow doing interesting things or writing interesting things or something. And I was given that opportunity, again, a really, really lucky opportunity, because it was transformative. Actually, I always said it was the most transformative piece of training, official training I've ever had. Oh, wow. It was pretty rigorous, pretty intense. It was like months and months and months. They used to give you these massive folders of reading. Each month you'd have to write an essay, and at the end of it, you'd write something. I wrote this thing. It was. I think they all got published in Campaign. I wrote it on memes, actually, this was well before social. And it was the only time I've ever really written anything that was kind of future stargazy kind of crystal ball stuff. And it was about how people would build brands as consumers, out of component parts that we would call memes. Nobody really understood that concept at that time. So the sort of cultural DNA of brands and brand building. And I think that's sort of happening. I think it's kind of, in a way, obviously memes have become a thing, means something slightly different in a social context, more specific thing now. But I do think that I mean, some people do talk quite a lot about memetics. I think it's probably just how brands are built. There's kind of accretion effect of, and the fact that brands are built in people's minds and by people, not companies so much, or at least our assumption that companies are building them and have control over them is stronger than the reality, I think.
Amazing. And so that got published, and obviously probably that in itself maybe propelled you even forward.
I think I think it made me comfortable, confident to write things, to put things out there. I haven't really talked about it much. And then from there, I started writing, as all the planners at AMV BBDO were expected to do, writing up their case studies for both for the IPA Effectiveness Awards and APG Awards and Marketing Society, the big slightly more strategy and effectiveness focused awards schemes, with the IPA as the real kind of gold standard in effectiveness. And so I started writing those for Sainsbury's. So at the time, when was it? 2007, 8, 9. It was Try Something New Today, and then something called Feed Your Family for a Fiver, which was a version of that. And those case studies, and the work was sort of famous in the industry, and the case studies were particularly famous in the planning world as real like kind of gold standard of what creative strategy could be at that time.
And those like writing those and inputting into them and pulling them together, like it's a phenomenal amount of work, but requires like an incredible amount of, I guess, discipline, and like there's a huge amount that goes into it. And I like when you read them, when they're good, they're amazing. I've read a lot of those effectiveness case studies, and they're phenomenal. How much time goes into putting one of those together?
I mean, just phenomenal amounts of time. In a way, too much time. I mean, unbelievable amounts, like months of work.
Yeah.
Which for there was, I mean, it's probably still true to a certain extent. Strategists and planners in certain kinds of agencies across the UK and more broadly are writing these things. They will have spent a few months, 2, 3, 4 months even, gathering insight, making their stories really tight, and writing these things up and making them look amazing. It's a phenomenal amount of work. To the extent that I think sometimes I look back on it and I think, God, it's amazing that we did that. And you as a strategist get this incredible thing out of it, which is a sort of 4,000 words, never better articulated version of your brand and your communications story, and ideally in the longer term, which is when I think they really work. Clients get this incredible thing that they're able to, even if you don't win, by the way, you have this paper that you can use. You've got this great evidence that your work is working. Clients can use that as a sort of emblem, as a symbol of how the work they and their agencies and their teams are producing. It's useful for agencies to stick the logos on their emails and say, shout about the awards that they win. It's really useful for individuals for their careers. So it's just kind of win-win, really. It does cost. It costs in time.
Yeah.
And I can't quite, in the world I'm now in, I can't quite imagine us having the time to focus so many months, so many hours on doing these things. That's an expensive thing to do. But I'm a huge advocate for it when it's possible and when the work is good enough. I love I think it's the excellence. I think there's something really excellent about the IPA Awards in particular, and also the APG Creative Strategy Awards, which are different, but really excellent, slightly different way.
And I think for probably the other benefit is for people entering the industry or students or, anyone like reading those and kind of getting to grips on, and even, going back in time to read a Sainsbury's or, whatever it is, actually reading them and kind of seeing what excellence is and can be, like, it's incredible. So like there's almost a legacy effect of them, that they can still be around and people should really dip into them and understand the history of this.
hugely. There's a treasure trove there. And they've been going, the IPA was been going since 1980. They've now got like 2,000 case studies, I think. That they are probably the single greatest body of evidence that advertising works, particularly brand building advertising. And of course, the data bank that came out of the case studies is the foundation stone upon which Les and Peter Burnett Field have done all of their, most of their analysis, and to kind of prove the meta case for it all. So it's just phenomenally valuable to the industry, not just the UK ad industry, but globally. And it's something we as the IPA, the UK, and broader can be really proud of as a body of work. And you don't see that coming out of other countries. You don't get that in the US. Australia, New Zealand have a bit of it.
Yeah, you touched on Sainsbury's, and I don't want to go into too much detail on it, but when I was reading up on it again, one of the really interesting things that came across for me, and I was interested, you talked about the data stuff, but the idea of simplifying things down. So correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a goal for Sainsbury's to increase revenue by a certain amount over a certain period, and actually it was a simplification of the problem.
I give you the numbers.
Yes. Yeah.
So I came to it after this bit of fag packet maths was done, but Bridget Angier and Craig Maudsley, who were later to become the CSOs at AMV, they pitch meeting. I think they all went away for a weekend somewhere, I think to Peter Suter's house in the country. And they took the goal on the brief, the client brief, was they needed to increase revenue by 2.5 billion over 3 years. And most minds would just see that as a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal that's kind of, a youthful statement of ambition, but isn't necessarily going to be useful to creative people in thinking about the problem.
Yeah.
I don't know at what point or why they decided, no, let's interrogate that 2.5 billion, but it unlocked something, which was they took 2.5 billion, they divided it by the 14 million customers that Sainsbury's then had a week. They divided it by 52 weeks. They divided that by 3 years, and they got to the number £1.14. And £1.14 sort of miraculously happened to be pretty much equivalent at the time to one item, the average price of an item in Sainsbury's. And that, I think, must have just unlocked another insight, which was, okay, well, if we only need, if it's £1.14 times 3 years times 52 weeks times 14 million customers, that is, we only need to get every customer to put one more little item in their basket every time they shop. And once they'd thought that idea, you've got something, you've taken the 2.5 billion and turned it into something that is creatively powerful. You've unlocked it in a way that creative people can take and use as creative fuel and as part of the brief. And there was a couple of other interesting sort of insights. One of which was around people sleep shopping. So to try and take that £1.14 and go, well, how do you actually get people to put £1.14 worth of stuff in their basket or their trolley? And they did some research and they worked out that most people are basically buying and cooking the same thing week in, week out. It's fairly standard insight, actually. Yeah,
still is.
But they talked about it as being people sleep shopping, which is a lovely way of putting it. So people are on automatic pilots. And if you think about sleep shopping, then you go, we need to wake people up. How do we wake people up? With inspirational food ideas. And so by creating food ideas, little recipe cards with little recipes on, that could be as simple as put some nutmeg on your spag bowl or put some mint with your lamb. Really simple, not groundbreaking things at all, but that just were inspired by this notion of giving people one extra thing to buy. Then you've got an idea that's got real communications power, and those food ideas were on recipe cards. They trained the people, they trained all the colleagues in Sainsbury's behind the fish counter and the meat counter to understand what would be a useful idea to give people. And they had a huge program of food idea recipe cards and that kind of stuff, and all the content that goes with that. Mostly this was pre-digital, so it was mostly kind of printed collateral and stuff. So that was that became try something new today. and they won the pitch, and then Try Something New Today became very, very powerful and successful. And they achieved they achieved 1.9 billion in extra sales over the first 18 months.
Wow.
So yeah, it hugely overachieved in terms of that 2.5 billion target, with an unbelievable ROI, and it even of that 1.9 billion, we did some econometrics which basically identified that 550 million of that was the idea alone, not the media channels it was in, but the actual idea. There's a step change in base sales, which could only be explained by that. And so, all of that came together as just a really fantastic strategy case study that I think still has value today.
Yeah, incredible. And it's like when you boil it down, you kind of go, that's so simple. But like, it's not, getting to that is, really obsessing about it, the insight, all those kind of moments. I often talk like the thousands of different things that have to happen to get to something that's so simple and so brilliant. And
it's funny at time, because that was 2007-8. That was pre Bar and Sharp and How Brands Grow, right? I'm not sure a strategist who was obsessed with Bar and Sharp and penetration would have got to that campaign idea, because the campaign idea sounds more about loyalty, frequency, sell. And if you're obsessed with penetration, you wouldn't have got to that. So it's a really interesting, and actually the data suggests that half of the extra sales came from existing shoppers, half from new shoppers, or just over half from new shoppers. So it's broadly in line with what you might expect from a sort of post-Byron world.
Wow.
But at the time, they weren't obsessing with that stuff. They were freer to think, I think.
Yeah, which is kind of like, it's very interesting because there is a lot of there's probably more evidence now, more theory, more of those amazing, books from the likes of Byron or Jenny or Karen or whoever. And I think you're right. Like sometimes that can limit our thinking. So, how, I guess, in your world, or the kind of the world of planners, strategists, how do people take that and actually ignore it? Like, do you know what I mean? Because I've just done an episode where I've called it Depends, right? Because your marketing is contextual.
Yeah, I don't know how you ignore it. I mean, I've become probably too not monotheistic, polytheistic, maybe. But I'm certainly at times been too reliant or too interested in frameworks. And you see, really good strategists are not into frameworks. They like to kind of rail against them, but use them occasionally. I mean, I love the phrase "freedom within a framework," which was something. When I was later at Ep10, when we were working at McDonald's, we had this set of brand pillars that became really famous within McDonald's and reasonably famous within the marketing world. And I like that sort of structure, which allowed a certain amount of thinking that was going to be not automatic, but was sort of given to you, but a certain amount of freedom as well. So I think freedom within a framework is a good sort of rule of thumb, so we don't get too trapped in the sort of frameworks that we and the I guess the sort of 10 commandments that we can sometimes feel get handed down to us by the gods of marketing science.
And understanding it all, I think, really like reading it and knowing what you need to know. On the McDonald's thing, just curious on the pillars. Were the pillars things like, it had to be in a McDonald's restaurant, it had to show, like, were they the kind of pillars, or were they more strategic around?
They were more strategic. So what they were, they identified essentially, it was a really interesting journey from that they were had historically in the UK been pretty focused on short-term sales, value saver menu communication, and also some of the promotional stuff. So every 6 weeks there'll be a new promotional window with a new menu item or limited edition products. The franchisees have got very, very fixed on those things, but then came the whole Supersize Me issue and Jamie Oliver talking about fast food and all that. The world of fast food was getting a really bad press, and so McDonald's had to fight back somewhat. And they realized that brand communication was going to need to be a part of that. So they identified two new roles for brand communication. One was trust. So they needed to win back the trust of their particularly their family audience. So parents and kids. And they needed to also reignite the spark of, let's call it, love or appeal or familiarity that they used to have or previously had with their core audiences, with the young adult audience. They'd spotted that people were not sitting in the windows. People were sitting further deep in. They didn't want to be seen. Wow. So there's this kind of stigma attached. So they need to get rid of that stigma. So alongside the value comms, the what we called, I think it was variety, the promotional stuff, we added in what we called favorites, which was the core menu items, the Big Macs, quarter pounders, all that stuff. And then trust, which was all about the good stuff that was changing in terms of sourcing and nutrition, that could earn back some of the trust that they probably deserve to earn back from some of those family audiences. So 4 pillars: value, favorites, value, variety, favorites, and trust. And they were essentially campaign strands.
Right.
And you can still see it today in their communication. And it's like they've lasted. I don't know if they still use the exact same set of pillars, but when you talk to people there's something that still in the memory of how that stuff works that was fixed from that point on. And in a way, they started out as a kind of set of almost McKinsey-esque, mutually exclusive, comprehensively exhaustive.
Right.
Communications pillars, brand pillars, and they turned into kind of creative comm strands, I think. But they did definitely use them internally as the structure of their teams. Their marketing teams were organized this way, and the trust pillar as well became a real there was a trust team in McDonald's who were constantly working on sourcing, sustainability, all those kinds of issues. So it wasn't just marketing; it was more. Business. It was deeper than that.
And I think when things, I talked to Mark Sands and Diageo about their dweeb process, and he was saying that it's across the business, everyone gets trained on it. So I think when things go across the business, then it is the such a huge impact. I want to get on to kind of more present stuff, but before I do, your journey kind of in effectiveness continued, and I know in BBH, they won the IPA Effectiveness Company of the Year. And so I'm just curious, obviously through the journey of all the agencies, you've kind of worked in this area a lot. What were some of the things that you were able to do to kind of create a culture of effectiveness in some of these places? And for anyone listening who might be trying to instill that now.
Yeah. So at BBH, so I went there in 2014 from Leo Burnett, and I was given a specific task initially. Actually, they wanted someone to start winning IPA awards again. And I just managed to achieve that at Leo Burnett with McDonald's and AMV with Sainsbury's. And then a couple of years later, they'd gone a bit off the ball, I think, at BBH in terms of their effectiveness awards. And they wanted to get that back. They wanted to get their mojo back, if you like. And the CEO at the time basically tasked me with sort of getting it back into the heart of the culture. It always had been really important to BBH. Their mantra, which I loved at the time, still do. It's our objective is effectiveness, our strategy, creativity.
Right.
Two sides of the same coin, effectiveness and creativity. Divide them at your peril. Remember that clients really need effectiveness. And as a creative agency, as a creative industry, your role in that, your strategy is always going to be delivering creativity. So if anybody tries to tell you that creative isn't effective, or effective work has to be really hardworking and dull, just that was not in the culture of BBH or AMV or any of the places I worked in. So it was about getting that back. And so what we did, it became an exercise in just making all the strategists write their case studies again, being really clear about what the headline stats were. What was the big headline that really proved that this was some of the most effective advertising in the UK or the world or wherever. And we would do things like we would turn effectiveness papers into just really simple, cool looking posters designed in the style of the campaign assets or the brand assets. Right. And one big headline for the campaign and a couple of little data points, and we put them on the walls around the place. Or we'd have a thing like for a couple of weeks in January, we'd each day we'd send out an email with the five kind of point story of how the campaign was working. And we made sure that strategists were engaging with their creative people on that stuff, because we made sure it was just something for everyone rather than just this kind of rarefied thing that only happens every 2 years with awards. So, because I think that's one of the dangers with agencies and effectiveness. It can seem like it's just about an awards thing. And I know I sometimes focus on that, but I think there's a much broader set of benefits that come from the awards piece, which is instilling it into the ways of working in a strategy department. So it's just part of it, and baking in effectiveness principles into the creative work from the get-go, into the creative brief. Yeah. And having conversations about it with creative people, and not seeing effectiveness as something that happens at the end of a process, just through measurement. I think effectiveness is much bigger culturally, to me, and organizationally to me, than just measurement. It's more of a way of working.
Yeah, and a belief, and probably needs the client to fully be bought in as well, right?
Today's show is brought to you by the Indie List CMO Collective. This service from the Indie List provides you with access to a curated range of highly experienced and talented senior marketing specialists. Visit theindielist.ie to find out more.
It does, yeah, and you need to identify the clients that are really into it, and focus on the places where you can really make a difference, as well as trying to get clients who don't have effectiveness stories to feel slightly a bit of FOMO, a bit of jealousy that they're not winning awards. Why shouldn't we?
Yeah, and for the right reasons. You're obviously you're in Jellyfish now for 3 years, and
yeah.
I've heard you say that, and you kind of talked about the two sides of the one coin, from effectiveness and creativity. Mm. And I think at Jellyfish, maybe there's a bit of two sides of the one coin, where media and creativity are coming back together. Yeah. And I know Rory Sutherland said previously that it's the worst thing ever happened is the divide. But am I right? Jellyfish is kind of on a bit of is it a mission to bring the two back closer together, or how would you describe it?
It's funny. It's actually less of a mission than I thought it would be. It's just a sort of fact of what we do.
Okay.
But it's Jellyfish is far too practical and pragmatic to ever have anything as highfalutin as a philosophy, or we have. I can tell a bit of the story, the history of Jellyfish. So it started out as more in the performance marketing space, so SEO, PPC, making websites. Grew pretty big through being given hundreds of clients, or they came to us through recommendation referral from Google.
Right. Okay.
Became a bit of an expert in Google. And then that leads to knowing more about their media. So we won a load of media clients accounts. And then through acquisition, brought in creative. And so we had creative production and mostly social creative, but also some more conceptual creatives as well. And so, and then, of course, within that, we've got really great media planners and media strategists, and a small band of brand strategists as well. And put those together, and you've got not only media and creative bridged, you've got the full funnel bridged. So the divides that we see in the industry between upper, mid, lower funnel begin to, or at least the ambition is that they begin to erode away. Because those silos just aren't there. So any of the silos become bridgeable. And so we've got sort of everything, and we're able to service all sorts of clients in all sorts of different ways. We have some that are just media clients, some that are just creative clients, some that are purely social, some where it's where the creativity is broader than that. And it's a really exciting place to be, because it means that essentially that we've got the entire modern marketing toolkit as a playground. And if we can connect up the right individuals, the best experts who know about each of those things, because all of those things are specialisms.
Yes.
And of course, some agencies will say, no, you only want to focus on one specialism. We happen to have a wide variety of specialisms, and if we can connect them up in the right way, then we can do unbelievable things, and it's really quite exciting. And the new layer to that, which more the AI technology is bringing, is only unlocking that further, because I think when you start working, particularly because a lot of our work is in, let's call it, the platforms. As soon as you get into the platforms, that connection between media and creative begins to be much closer, because in order to operate really well in Meta or TikTok or wherever, you've got to have people who really know that platform, and they will naturally have an affinity with. They may be a creative person making TikToks, but they'll naturally have an affinity with a media person who knows that platform from a media perspective. So you can put those two people together and get something quite amazing. And you can bridge, and there's other gaps that I've observed, like, there's a gap between paid social and organic social, or owned social. You can begin to bridge those gaps, because cross-fertilizing the different kinds of people that are making creative for those purposes, put them next to each other and get them talking, and they can learn each other's skills. And so that's quite an exciting opportunity as well. So, and we'll talk about that as one social. So we like to think of social as being a big playground, admittedly, with lots of different tactics and lots of different platforms, but quite an exciting playground where you might, do your experimentation with organic. You might see what works, test what works, and then put some money behind it. And then you might scale up those campaigns, the stuff that really works, to get you the reach that that paid advertising can get you, but that organic content won't often get you. So that's sort of, and that's the theory. But the practice is what really matters. And we're really into that.
And has that, because I know you've talked then about the role digital can play in building brands. Has this work with Jellyfish kind of allowed you really see that firsthand? Because again, there was a belief, that no, you can't build a brand on digital. I came across that in my previous organization. Like, no, you can't. TV, and look, TV is a great broad reaching platform, but has that allowed you kind of see that firsthand and really give you the evidence that it's a place that you can build a brand?
Yeah. And it's funny how, all of my previous agencies would profess to be really into digital, really trying, and with some, real digital experts. Even talking about the word digital feels a bit old hat actually now. But I'm talking sort of 10 years ago, when the more established creative agencies were trying to get themselves together. But even in those places, you're still essentially selling. You've got one product, which is creativity, and you're selling big ideas, and often, and surprisingly often, those big ideas expressed through a longer film, wherever that might end up. And when you're in that environment, you naturally have a bias towards the history of the work that kind of place had done. And that would naturally be looking at John Webster or Haggerty or these godlike characters made their name in TV. So I love TV, but I think when you're looking back on it as a tactic, or as a channel, as a platform, whatever you want to call it, it's not so healthy. And it's only by you can see that the decline in linear TV viewing now is leading to many more mainstream clients needing to believe, and wanting to believe, but also discovering that in some of these newer digital platforms, brand building is perfectly possible, and is happening and is measurable in a way that maybe they've just been slightly blinkered to before, or their agency partners hadn't kind of opened their eyes to before. And that's certainly the journey I've gone on. I'm aware that your biases are slightly determined by the places where you work. And so, of course, I work in a place which has this wide variety of new platforms, or platforms that at our fingertips. We don't happen to make linear TV commercials or sell or buy and plan many TV campaigns. We'll do connected TV. So we're definitely kind of in the platform world, if you like, but it's a rich world with loads of opportunities, and I think they're currently kind of untapped.
Yeah.
So when the presentation that me, Grace, and Les did at Cannes last year, and that turned into a sort of longer thing that I've done in different places, that was really about many of the different ways and tactics that you can deploy to get more attention, get more seconds of attention in digital platforms, because that's historically been the issue.
Yeah.
Get people watching more of your video. And video is the place where the kind of emotional resonance is possible, that enables brand building memories to be encoded. And so there's plenty of video happening. And of course, as we have video platforms that have been built video first, that becomes even more possible. So if you look at YouTube and TikTok is, I guess, the prime exponents of those. So it's the notion. I think there are fewer and fewer clients who believe that brand building cannot happen in other than TV. But there are still clients that are fairly TV first. But when you look at the actual, I think it's 51% of all commercial advertising exposure is now non-TV. And so you're in a world where I think where there's somewhat of a tipping point where digital first becomes important, and that TV first or linear TV first perspective, it just becomes one of the many tactics. And you now need to look at the array of assets you're creating and think about what's how are you going to build your brand through this multiplicity of touch points and assets, rather than we're going to create one big thing and then cut it up and put it everywhere else. Yeah. Which I think is the main thing that's changing.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And I was lucky enough to see it firsthand in two markets, Singapore and Australia, where by nature or virtue of budgets, we weren't able to do other things. And we saw the impact on our just like kind of awareness metrics, just quite simply, in those two markets through digital only activities. Because again, we couldn't do anything else. And so it was a forced experiment. And so, we were seeing it. I was like, wow, this can happen. It can work. But the principles of good work still apply. So, you have to still, and maybe even more so, the idea of, a TV being the central point of someone's living room and being, as Paul Feldwick mentioned in his book, the idea of a good guest in that room still applies when you're on someone's phone.
Totally. Completely. And so, in the Cannes presentation, actually, that's it's a John O'Toole quote. So we're an uninvited guest in the living room of a prospect with the magical power to make you disappear instantly. He was talking about TVs in living rooms, big screens on walls, and the predominant mechanism by which this stuff now works is the same. It's a small screen in your hand. It's maybe more personal, but people will make us disappear instantly just by flicking past us, by ignoring us, by scrolling past. And so the principle is the same. The mechanism, the distribution mechanism is slightly different. And the other thing, I think, we now have the data that shows how little attention people have ever paid to our ads in whatever format, of whatever length. And when you look at those retention curves across all media, they're all pretty weak, even TV. So the notion that someone is glued to their TV screen, obsessively, hanging on to every second of your 30 or 60 second, or even your not. I mean, who's ever seen a 90 for a while?
Yeah.
That's probably never been true.
Yeah.
But now we've got the data. We know that 30-second TV commercial will have 13 seconds of attention, and a 15-second YouTube will have 5 or 6 or 7 or so. And there's not much you can do about that. You can get to the top of the range. You can get a bit beyond it, but they're fairly fixed, according to Karen Nelson-Field, in terms of the amount of attention, seconds of attention you can get from any individual format. But the retention curve is broadly the same. It changes slightly from platform to platform.
And is it creativity that's going to get you those extra pieces? I did ask Karen about that as well.
Yeah. Karen has a slightly different view. I think. I think when she's a bit more media focused. The media will bring most of the eyeballs, and then and will set the range of attention that you can achieve. And the creativity is responsible for the delta, the difference in amount of attention from bottom to top. So that to me says media is fundamental, but creativity, in terms of getting you the reach to start with, but creativity is the thing that will make the difference for you as a brand. And that's always been the case. Yeah. And in that, the work I did in that CAN presentation to look at all the different kind of rules and best practices, and they all basically boil down to what I was saying, A, B, C, D, E: attention, branding, communication, difference, and emotion. That those principles would be as recognizable to Bill Bernbach and to some of those ad legends of the 60s as they should be to modern creatives working in any platform today.
I agree, and it's fascinating. I like when you say it in that context, like go back, and that would still apply. I know a lot of people listening today who are in charge of maybe smaller brands, not a McDonald's maybe, but are trying to figure out how they maybe apply some of these principles to their organizations, and maybe conversations they're having, because the smaller budgets might force you down a road of, well, I need to get my performance marketing, or what a great marketing term that is. But that stuff working, and that's it. That's all I've time and budget for. So what advice would you have for people in that situation?
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? You get agency people like me pontificating to clients who have no real understanding of the harsh reality of client life and budget constraints and all those kinds of things. So the theory is fine, and I understand, the theory is there, but the reality of a client who needs to start with some basics, like some search, then maybe some display, then maybe some social, and you can understand how the sort of gold standard of bothism, starting with everything together, probably doesn't apply. But I think once people have done some of the basics and they're seeing things sort of max out, whether that's in search or display or some social, paid social, experimenting with creativity, experimenting with, well, let's set aside some budget to see what happens when we get really creative in TikTok or in some YouTube or whatever it is. I think it's probably an exercise in layering in, so long as you're doing that in a way that is creatively connected and is connected in terms of your brand ambitions and your brand strategy and your messaging. I feel like that's completely okay to do. Even, obviously the kings of this sort of the 60-40, Les and Peter, their work says you can start, if you're launching a new brand, if you're a small brand, you can probably flex the ratio in the opposite direction. So I don't think ever telling clients of any size that they have to be at 60-40 or even 80-20 is helpful, because it's against the reality of things. But allowing clients to edge their way towards that and seeing it as somewhat of a maybe a North Star or kind of somewhere to head to. Or even just experimenting your way towards it. It was Gusto in the UK. They were very predominantly performance focused, and they kind of rethought everything, and they worked out they needed to create a stronger pool of future demand, to priming new customers who would then fall into market and be kind of harvestable. And they did that incrementally, and they got to a place where I think they ended up at 60-40 without having aimed at it. So I think it's a step-by-step thing.
Yeah.
And even, the McDonald's story is sort of similar, where they had to convince the franchisees to allow them to do some brand campaigns, and they layered those in over time. It wasn't suddenly we're going to go all in on brand. And that in itself is pretty dangerous. I think when you have people zigzagging, not that it wouldn't or couldn't work, it's just that it's hard to see it working immediately. So it's more likely to get kind of switched off, and for somebody to come along and say, well, that hasn't worked, we're going to do something different. And then by doing that, you create inconsistency, and inconsistency creates waste.
Yeah.
And chopping and changing is never good.
I've seen that where, big investment, short-term view, and people didn't work, cut, whatever reason. And, I've had an experience before where there was a conversation around potential budget for a particular market. And I just said, if we can't sustain it, spend it somewhere else. Put it in a different place, because it was so wasteful.
Yeah. The amount of times, I think we've all seen it. New CMO comes in, or new marketing director with a different philosophy and says, this is all about brand now. And they get a new agency in, and the new agency, of course, is obliging and creating a new campaign that is necessarily way too different from the last, disconnected. And they probably then don't have the right measurement in place. They haven't done the right kind of rolling the pitch, I think they say in politics, like stakeholder engagement, to understand, to make sure people's expectations are set right, and that you're not going to get some sort of step change in performance overnight. That's not how these things work. And so it just gets switched off because it's seen as a failure, and then they limp on to the next thing, or they might either. Sometimes what you have is it actually means you have 3 or 4 years of like brand darkness, where no, we don't do that here. We brand as a dirty word. I hate that. When we tried that once. It's one of my worst things when you hear a client say, "Oh no, brand doesn't work for us," or it's such a it's just never true that something does not work. It may have been true that one particular thing was
unsuccessful,
didn't work, or wasn't measured right. But it's of course, then you need to iterate and get better, not switch it off and decide it's a dirty word.
I want to ask you a couple more questions, but just as we're talking about brand, I did read somewhere you had people often say, "Oh, how do I talk to my CEO or CFO about brand when they don't understand it, or they don't believe in it?" And you had a great piece of advice, which was ask them why they bought their car, watch, or jumper that they were wearing. Like I just love that. It was really practical.
Yeah. It's a classic. I've had a lot of conversations about this issue of often CFOs, finance people, not getting it, and usually the advice from people like the IPA, really good advice, is learn the language of the boardroom, understand and learn the right terminology so that you can have these kinds of high level conversations. And then they also the standard thing often from an agency perspective is you're asked to create a kind of a selling deck that persuades that kind of individual in leadership in an organization of the benefits of brand building activity, or the benefits of balance, or whatever their particular issue is. And of course you end up with all the familiar Binet field charts, and you might try and make the data a bit more appropriate to the particular brand. But what you're still doing is I'd say like a system 2 approach, which is trying to persuade somebody of the benefits of something through facts. And we know as marketing people, as communications people, that system 2 is useful, but it's not the only thing, and it's probably not sufficient. And so something which is more of a system 1 approach, which is more persuasive or emotional or human, as simple as, why did you buy that Rolex? I think can have an interesting impact on a kind of personal level. So it's a useful way of just contextualizing for somebody that may not have appreciated what it really means out of the context of the spreadsheets and the budgets and all of that sort of stuff. What it means to build a brand.
When I read it, I was like, that is just brilliant advice for anybody who's struggling with that today. You mentioned previously, we were talking about the kind of effectiveness work, and maybe we don't see as much of that in the US. And I know there was commentary earlier this year about US marketers not as strong as we're seeing in other places. And like, I know a lot of US marketers, and I think they're incredible. So there's differences though, and I think there's some really important differences for me, my understanding of the US market, in that it's huge, right? So first of all, there are different types of marketing that you need to and can do there that we don't have over here, right? Even on TV buying, you can buy TV at a very kind of almost granular level in a big city, which isn't as easy to do over here. But like, that's just one example. I find it like it's just it's a vast territory. I'd love to get your views on it.
Yeah. So the US, and it's kind of there's this UK, Australia, New Zealand, non-American English-speaking world, which I think believes itself to have a some sort of monopoly on the idea, the theory of marketing effectiveness or marketing science. And I think from a position of sitting in the UK, not being as familiar with the US market, and I'm really not, it's easy to believe that that over there they're just not that into it. I think it's probably true that they're not so into the theory, and it's true that Ritson's penetration is if you do a share of search analysis on Ritson
might do that.
fields, Scott Galloway, you would see that Scott Galloway and Gary V, well, maybe less Gary V at the moment, but Scott Galloway, vastly greater sort of share of mind, share of search, all the shares than any of the UK or Australia or New Zealand effectiveness people. Byron Sharp, even How Brands Grow. It was a survey done about 4 years ago, I think, in UK senior UK and Dutch marketing people. Only 11% had read How Brands Grow.
Right.
You can imagine what the penetration of How Brands Grow is, therefore, in the US. I imagine it's well under 1%.
Yeah.
So they just have it's a different market with different touch points and different priorities. I think it's probably more hard nosed. The commercial reality of business in America it's really competitive.
Yeah.
And they have different things they look towards. I think they look towards the tech world. And Scott Galloway is very much in that kind of that sort of tech space. The way he talks, the kind of philosophies they have, which are much more about building and testing it, creating product market fit, getting word of mouth, virality. Far more predominant than over here, where we're able to talk in these rarefied terms about brand building.
Yeah.
And so I think this notion that we could somehow just get the Americans to wake up and read our books and articles and buy our training courses and all the things that all these characters are trying to sell, because they're all selling something, right? And they've spotted there's a market. So this debate really is about UK, Australia, New Zealand experts wanting to sell stuff in the US because it's a big market. That's what's going on.
Yeah, it is, and it's they're wildly different places. It's fascinating.
And if you do want the US to be a bit more, I guess, thoughtful, or maybe practice more of this stuff, it's not going to be about selling them theory, because they're deeply practical.
Yeah.
Bunch of people. They might want case studies. They might want examples. They'll certainly want it to feel homegrown. So get Americans on a stage talking about how they've done it, how they've turned their companies around through these kinds of methods.
Yeah.
Don't show them marketing science. Don't talk about it as theory. Talk about it as practice in their language. And I think you're probably able to get them to buy into it. But that's even if you believe they're not doing it anyway, which I think is debatable.
Yes, exactly. And you'd want probably strong evidence. But I do remember, like, on that point of kind of maybe the theory, I do remember not too long ago, maybe kind of a year and a half, 2 years ago, somebody a very senior marketer trying to make a case to not cut off brand, just talk about recession and all that kind of stuff. And I remember drip feeding them like a ton of information from WARC and other places, and they hadn't seen any of it.
Yeah, no, it's certainly true. And I sort of exaggerate to make a point, but it's true that there are, I've got clients who are in the US and have found a kind of secret weapon, which is this body of learning and body of work.
Yeah.
They use sparingly, and they use the practice more than the theory. The theory they've got in their heads, they're not showing Binet and Field charts, but they're using that to have high-level conversations which persuade their stakeholders that they want to do a test in this city, or we want to do something, more upper funnel work, or we need to be exploring brand campaigns in certain ways.
Yeah.
And so they're doing it in a much more practical way. I can't name names, but I've got a particular individual in mind who's really into this stuff, and is changing the way they operate in the category they're in. And it's probably a competitive advantage for that brand, or will be when they get it going.
Yeah.
So,
look, I will name because former CMO of mine, Paul Darcy, he's now at Miro, and like incredible for this stuff. And he was great at kind of, looking for the evidence and reading and sharing, and then creating a culture of us as his team understanding this stuff. And so like it's there, but it's just different. It is totally different. Listen, we're coming to the end. I did have one last question for you. You mentioned up towards the start that kind of talking from agency to client. Have you ever looked or thought about going client side?
I would never say never. I did at one point think about a role in a client organization, although it was a sort of marketing, almost creative agency within that organization. I've always been a bit doubtful. I've always been quite. I love the freedom and fun of agency life, and I've always been a bit worried that that would somehow inhibit me or limit me in some ways if I was then in a very corporate environment. I also, one of the things I love doing is I love the writing, and I'm aware that if I was in a client organization, that might be really limited.
Yeah.
Particularly some kinds of organizations like financial services or something would be really limited.
Yeah.
Because I think you just get a bit more freedom to do that sort of stuff in agency world, which is so important to me. But I would never say never.
Yeah. That's a very good point, actually. You probably would, because they'd be like, well, that's your opinion, but you're representing us. You need to get all sorts of approvals. Listen, Tom, thanks so much for taking so much time to talk to me today. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I could have gone on. I've about 10 more pages of questions, but we leave that for another day. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Conor. It's been great.
Well, what an amazing and enjoyable episode. And honestly, I did have about 10 more pages of questions I wanted to ask Tom, but we will have to get back to them. I loved hearing Tom's view on not just effectiveness, but also practical things like having conversation with your CEO or CFO, how to approach that and making it more relatable. The damage of believing that something doesn't work and holding that view firm. And whether or not the US is behind us in terms of marketing. I'd love to get your views and comments on that. Tom's thought leadership is characterized by a balanced approach to marketing, and I'm sure, like me, you got lots from today's episode. If you are enjoying our episodes, please do like and review wherever you are listening or watching. It really helps build on this amazing community of marketers just like you. That's it for today's episode. You can, of course, find us all over social media on Twitter, X, I will get that right someday, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. Just look for That's What I Call Marketing. Until our next episode, thanks very much for listening or watching.
Thanks to the Indie List for sponsoring today's show. Visit theindielist.ie to find out more.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
Are you facing the maze of global expansion? Diplomat introduces the diplomacy model, a cost-effective, innovative approach to navigating the complexities of your brand's presence in international markets. Visit diplomat.agency